What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to be wrapping up our draft strategy series where we're going to go over picks 9 through 12. We have 4 mocks to go into. We're going to be attacking these drafts from every single one of those spots. I'm going to break down exactly what's going through my mind as I'm in the draft seat pushing the buttons on these players. Now, before we get into that, you guys have been blowing up the channel recently, so there's a lot of you guys out there who are new. And if you like the content, if you want fantasy football content daily from now through week 1, and then we're going to help you win your championships from week 1 through week 17, make sure you go down below, subscribe, and leave a like. Let's go.
Here we go.
Before we get into the mock drafts themselves, let's do a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing for those of you guys who have been following along. First, we broke down my 3 favorite strategies in fantasy football. The first one was hero running back. We go 1 RB early, wide receivers in the middle rounds, and then we get the RBs late. We punt our RB2. Then we have bimodal RB, where we go RB, hammer all the other positions. Then we kind of wait on our RB3. And then we do have our 0 running back strategy, where we punt running back altogether, and we hammer every other position. And I covered all of them in the last 10 days, so if you have missed out on any one of those strategy videos, make sure you go back to my channel, check those videos out, because I outlined all of them in depth. The central idea of all of these draft strategies is we want to bypass the RB dead zone. We know that this is one of the best ways to lose your leagues in fantasy football. I'm trying to shy away from taking running backs in rounds 3 through 6. That's why you'll see in these mock drafts, I'm usually not taking a running back in that range. And I want to reference this chart one more time. Hayden Winks made it, and it's a great chart, and it shows exactly what I'm talking about. This shows the win rates above and below expectations, so 8.3%. Obviously, that's 1 divided by 12. And we can see that the positive win rates are coming from running backs that are chosen in the first 2 rounds. After that, all the win rates are negative besides a couple spots from rounds 3 through 5. And that's going to be the dead zone. Those are the spots we want to avoid taking running backs, and we want to opt for wide receivers, tight ends, sometimes quarterbacks in that range. So that brings us to our first mock draft of the day. And I want to just reiterate, these mock drafts are full PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flexes, and 7 bench spots. I feel like that is probably the most standard settings that are kind of what everyone runs in their own home leagues. Now, we're going to be running this first one out of the 12 spot. And I love the 12 spot because there's just this fat tier of guys I like in this range. You know, you can have Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Kelsey, and Saquon. Those are the 5 guys I really like that go in this range. They're all tier 1 guys to me that you can find in the back half of the draft. And if you can grab 2 of those, you're looking great. And you can kind of almost secure grabbing 2 of those if you're drafting from the 12 spot. So we're looking at here, we have Stephon Diggs available, Saquon available, and Kelsey available. Here I pass on Saquon just because, or I pass on Kelsey just because I think Saquon gives us massive upside at running back. I don't mind going Kelsey there, but I mean, we lock in Diggs, we lock in Saquon. Those are guys that I think have, you know, are pretty likely to finish top 5 at wide receiver and running back. Then we go all the way back around to the 312, 401. And this is kind of a weird spot to be in at the 12 spot because you have to wait a full, I don't know, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it's like 22 picks between picks. So you really have to, really at the mercy of the draft room. Now, at the 312, this isn't a super hard pick. You know, Swift and Dobbins are off the board. And after Swift and Dobbins are off the board, I'm not interested in too many of these running backs in that 3rd round, 4th round range. I'm kind of waiting for the, you know, Chris Carsons and David Montgomerys of the world to fall into my lap in the late 4th, early 5th. That's when I'm comfortable taking those guys. And that's because I want to be drafting these wide receivers in this range, whoever you want, between Woods, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, you know, all of those guys. I love the value you can get there in the 3rd and 4th round. So I'm scooping 2 of those guys in this range every time in the 3rd and 4th. And we go Godwin, Woods this time just to kind of switch things up. Those aren't exactly who's the highest on my ranks. But when you have so many drafts and you're always taking wide receivers in this range, I don't mind diversifying. And for the sake of the video, it's more construction than it is individual player analysis. So you just grab 2 wide receivers in that range and you move on with your day. I will say that all of those wide receivers in that range are razor close for me. So if you like Kupp, if you like Tyler Lockett ahead of Robert Woods and Godwin, I wouldn't really care that much if you want to go that direction. Which then brings us to the 512 and the 601. And This is my favorite pocket for this spot in the draft because I kind of hate the 6th round these days. The 6th round, I'm not trying to spend a 6th round pick on. If you can see the 6th round, it's Devonta Smith, Brandon Cooks, Jerry Jeudy, Juju, Tyler Boyd, Cortland Sutton, Robbie Anderson. None of those guys I really feel like are home run 6th round picks. I don't think those guys are all worthy of 6th round picks. For most of them, I'd prefer like a Devonta Smith, a Jerry Jeudy, a Tyler Boyd. I'd prefer a Juju in the 7th round. But thankfully, Hawkinson and Odell Beckham were available. Now, I don't mind in this range going, at the 512, if Lamar is there, if Kyler's there, if Mark Andrews is there, and if Hawkinson's there, I'm taking one of them. So thankfully, we have Hawkinson available. We go with him. And I have OBJ as my last wide receiver in that previous tier. I love that tier of OBJ, Chase Claypool, Ayuk, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. Those are the 5 guys I want. As soon as it becomes the 5th round, I want one of those guys. And if they're all off the board, then I'm kind of not panicking because obviously we're always staying water. We're always under control. But those are the guys I want in the 5th round. Now, we have a stud tight end, we have an RB1, and we have our wide receiver all the way through the flex filled up through 6 rounds. So we're sitting pretty right now. Then the 7-12 comes, and I have no clue how both Laviska Shenault and Javonte Williams are available. Now, obviously, Javante's a stupid value there. My usual rule of thumb is 6 wide receivers through the first 8 picks, but it's completely fine to deviate that when value comes. My biggest thing is we want to stay flexible. Don't stay. I outline all of these strategies. Don't stay too rigid to one or the other. You can kind of flip flop between strategies as things fall to you. There's no reason to be like, okay, to just like take a wide receiver to take a wide receiver. I do love Laviska Shenault. I like Michael Gallup, but I'm not passing up on Javonte Williams or either of those guys. And he's the perfect RB2 for this kind of build because now we have Saquon at the RB1, we have Javonte in RB2. We can afford low-end RB2 production, but Javonte has this ceiling where he can beat out Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon can get cut. Gordon could get traded. He has all of these outs to insane upside at RB2, and if you can get that at the 7-12, that's massive, massive value. Then we're kind of a little bit thinner at wide receiver than I like to be because we did take 3 detours through 8 rounds. But Mike Williams falls into our lap in the 9th round. And now we have our 6 solid wide receivers all the way locked in. And this is when we have to shift our focus off of wide receivers. This is where, after the 9th round, this is where it really becomes a running back heavy territory. And then next to Mike Williams, we go Zach Moss, who's just a perfect, off the bench RB3. I talked him up in my breakout running backs video, but I love Zach Moss for the idea that maybe the Bills don't want to ram Josh Allen, their franchise quarterback, into the goal line against the Jets or the Dolphins or against, on like a random Week 7 game. I don't think that that's in their best interest to win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen and have him stay durable. They're not going to want to keep on ramming him into the linemen and linebackers all the time. So there's a world where Zach Moss becomes the goal line back on a high scoring offense, and he just falls into the end zone for 10 times. And that is a fine, him and Javonte Williams will be fine as our RB2s. We come back around into the 11th, and I love Jalen Hurts. That's such an easy pick in the 11th round. Jalen Hurts used to be a guy that would go in that Tannehill, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford range. I don't know why he's seen as someone that's not in that range. He is this Konami code quarterback. He averaged 20 points per game as a rookie, and we want to target these Konami code guys that rush. Unless if you're in a 6-point passing touchdown league, this is a 4-point passing touchdown. Most leagues are 4-point passing touchdown, and if that's the case, Jalen Hurts has the kind of upside and ceiling that we want from our late round Konami code QBs. Then we're looking at the 12 spot, and it's close for me between Sony Michel and a James White or Giovanni Bernard, because we already kind of have these, RB3s that have paths to upside, which is what Sony Michel is. But I think that Sony Michel is too much to pass on to try and get one of those PPR monster, type guys. And I think that we were too thin to go with a guy like Alexander Mattison, who's kind of just a pure handcuff. When we have a hero running back build and we need startable weeks from our running backs, it's tough to go with a pure handcuff that early. So instead, we just go later on with Darrington Evans. But in this spot, I felt like, why not go Sony Michel? I like Sony Michel as like an ambiguous guy. I'm not sure if this is just fantasy pros, letting me get a guy like Sony Michel late. We will see where his ADP kind of adjusts as the weeks go on here. But I love him as a guy late because Darrell Henderson, 1, has never stayed healthy, and 2, the Rams won't commit to him. Then we come back around, and Rondale Moore is just too much of a value for me to pass up there. I have to go with Rondale Moore. He probably shouldn't be there, but has to happen. Then we go Darrington Evans, so we get a perfect, nice little handcuff in there. I would have liked to have a PPR floor guy, but I think Javonte Williams and Zach Moss will give us enough usable weeks to be just fine at RB2. We're super strong at wide receiver. We come back in the last round, we get Justin Fields. So we lock up our quarterback spot. Our tight end spot is solid with Hawkinson. I love this team because we're stacked literally everywhere besides RB2, and that's the position I'm most interested in punting. If I have to surrender one position, it would be RB2, because I've said this in all of these strategy videos. When Cam Akers went down, Darrell Henderson's price went all the way up to an RB2. When Michael Thomas went down, Marquez Callaway is still just a flyer flex play. So when these running backs go down, you can just get an RB2 off waivers, and you can replicate RB2 production very easily, especially because a lot of these RB2s, like a Myles Gaskin, like a Josh Jacobs, they're going to bust. They're going to bust some weeks. They're, like on a weekly basis, an RB2 can easily be made up for from your team just simply off waivers. Zach Moss could fall in the end zone and he could match whatever Josh Jacobs does for your opponent's team. Then let's look at this mock from the 109. In this one, we got a little freaky here. Now, again, at that 9 spot, we are looking at that tier of Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I also think that if you're more of a running back guy, I also think he wasn't available, but I think Jonathan Taylor will be here sometimes. He's very interesting in this spot, and so is Aaron Jones. I like Aaron Jones and Jonathan Taylor at the back end of the first. We're going to have a mock where we do that in a second, but here we went Diggs, and in a full PPR, Diggs led the league in receptions, and he led the league in targets last year. Getting him in a PPR league, you're getting a massive floor for your team. He's now in year 2 with Josh Allen. He could go crazy. So we lock up Stephon Diggs. We come back around, and the guys I'm looking for in the early second are DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Antonio Gibson, Austin Eckler, and Aaron Jones. Those are my favorite guys in this range, and Calvin Ridley is my highest ranked player. The guys who were available was Calvin Ridley and Antonio Gibson from that list. And if you want to go Gibson there and run a hero running back team, completely fine with that. Completely fine with that. If you're not really into zero running back and you want to get a running back through 2 rounds, go Antonio Gibson there. I think that's absolutely fine. But for me personally, and just so I can show you guys some zero running back teams, especially because zero RB is probably at its best from the back half of drafts, I wanted to show off a team real quick. And we come on the way back to the 309, and I think there's a very clear tier in the 3rd round. We have the tight ends, we have Keenan Allen, we have Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, Dobbins, Swift, CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper. Then we have a drop-off from there to this huge tier of wide receivers with Woods, Kupp, Evans, all of those guys. So we have CeeDee Lamb fall to us, and that's an easy pick of the 309. I'll take him there all day. So we literally start out with wide receiver 2, wide receiver 5, and wide receiver 12 off the board. 3 top 12 wide receivers, 3 wide receiver 1s. Now remember, past the top 2 to 3 running backs, people all across the board on Twitter are going to tell you that running backs score more than wide receivers. If you go back and you look at the points per game, literally the only running backs that are outscoring the wide receivers are the top 2 to 3. Outside of the top 2 to 3 running backs, the wide receivers are matching running back production. So we grabbed 3 top 12 guys. We have a huge edge at wide receiver now through 3 picks. Now we took best player available at every pick. We end up with 3 wide receivers. Now we kind of want to mold this into a nice zero running back team. And we just keep going best player available. We go DJ Moore. Really nice. I love DJ Moore. He's going to fit in at our 2nd flex spot. And in the 5th, we need to be careful with our detours, because in zero running back, we want to take a lot of wide receivers, and we want to take more than just, how many wide receivers you can start. We want to have a robust wide receiver core. Now, there's a really cool article by Sean Siegel that he dropped maybe a year or 2 ago that's called "If Zero Running Back Isn't Working for You, It's Because You Aren't Drafting Enough Wide Receivers." And he says that you kind of want to have 6 wide receivers that finish top 15. You want to have that kind of depth and upside to crush your league. Now, I'm not saying that every single one of my wide receivers are going to be top 15, but he's saying through waivers, through however, you want to have 6 wide receivers that are top 15 in points per game. And I like to do this by going 6 wide receivers through 8 rounds. So our next 4 picks, from picks 5 through 8, 2 of them should be wide receivers and 2 of them should be quarterback, tight ends, running backs. Now, obviously, if a wide receiver value is there, you can go with another wide receiver. if three, if there's three values at quarterbacks, tight end, running backs, you can take the detours there. You can stay flexible. That's just a baseline. It's 2 and 2. Now we take a gamble here because in the 5th round, it was close between OBJ, Hawkinson, and Kyle Pitts, and we also have Lamar Jackson on the board. So we have 3 guys that go in the onesie positions. Onesie positions are tight end and quarterback because only one goes in each of them. And OBJ is my last wide receiver of that tier. Like I said with the last mock, that round 6 for wide receivers is almost dead to me. And it doesn't mean that I want to be taking running backs in that range. It means I kind of want to be taking tight ends or quarterbacks if a Lamar, TJ Hawkinson, Pitts, Andrews are there, or if like Odell falls to the 6. So we take Odell and we kind of gamble here. We hope that Lamar, Hawkinson, or Pitts can make it back to us. Pitts makes it back to us in the 6, which I think is just insane value. I have Pitts as like, what do I have? I have him as like a 4th round pick. So that's just crazy value. And this is why we like tiers, because we knew that we had 3 guys we liked at quarterback and tight end, and we only had 1 wide receiver. So we grabbed the wide receiver and we hope that one of the 3 makes it back to us. Now in the 7th and 8th rounds, we still want to make one more detour between running back and quarterback. And I'm really just looking at running back because after Lamar, Kyler, Josh Allen, that tier of quarterbacks, I'm not too interested in the Russell Wilsons, Aaron Rodgers of the world. So in the 7th and 8th round, I'm going to be looking to make a detour off of running back or off of wide receiver to a running back. And we go with Javonte. Javonte's sitting there in our laps like he always is. Just a clear value in the 7th. But if this is a more competitive league where Javonte Williams isn't going to be there for you, I still think that Trey Sermon and Chase Edmonds are plenty viable. Now, I want to make it clear. Chase Edmonds is very interesting at that 804 spot. But in a 0 RB build, or at least I personally am passing on Edmonds because Shenault needs to be in our wide receiver core. We didn't take 6. We want to have 6 wide receivers, and then once we get to that 9th round, the value falls off. So let's say we pass on Shenault and we get to the 9th round. We're looking at Marvin Jones, Devontae Parker, Henry Ruggs, Elijah Moore. Those aren't guys I'm comfortable with starting in my flex, but Laviska Shenault is a legit back-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 for me. So I like putting him in there. We pass on the running back, and it just boils down to the thing that Sean Siegel was talking about in his article. We want to make sure we draft enough wide receivers because 0 running back doesn't work unless we really established an edge at that position. We don't want to kind of hedge and kind of half send the 0 running back and take a Chase Edmonds in the 8th round there. So then we come back to the 909, and this is where it's time to really start hammering running backs. We grab Zach Moss, who I think is fine as an RB2. He's a starting running back on his team, has huge TD upside, and I don't mind him and Javonte at all. Then we come to the 10th round. This pick needs to be a running back. I would have loved to have this be James Conner, but he goes right at the 9-10, and we miss out on him. So we have to settle for A.J. Dillon, who A.J. Dillon isn't bad because he's going to be probably a weekly RB3 on a high-scoring team that'll get like maybe 12 to 15 touches a week. And he also has massive upside if Aaron Jones comes down. Then we kind of grab a James White in the 11th to get us that like PPR monster archetype. And insane value, Ryan Tannehill in the 12th round. I can't say this enough. I know that this isn't anything new. Like obviously we've been hearing about it from JJ Zacharias in the late round quarterback strategy, but now more than ever, because Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, all of these like mobile quarterbacks get pushed up, and it is worth it to take one of those guys. But you could get a Ryan Tannehill in the 12th round. Maybe this is just a Fantasy Pros thing. Maybe that's not going to happen in your home league. But I've seen Ryan Tannehill will stick around, Burrow will stick around, Hurts will stick around. Grabbing one of those guys late isn't a bad idea at all. Then from there, we go Terrace Marshall, who just shouldn't be there in the 13th round. In your home leagues, though, I will say Terrace Marshall will be there in the 12th, 13th. Please grab Terrace Marshall and thank me later. We've been talking him up since Dynasty season. I had him as my wide receiver 2 pre-draft in the process ahead of, Waddle, Devonta Smith. And I know that you guys are probably going to get mad at me for saying that, but that's just kind of how I felt about it back then and still. Then we go Darrington Evans, who gives us a nice pure handcuff. And we go Wayne Gallman, who's, a nice ambiguous backfield piece. And we want to have a piece of that San Francisco 49ers backfield on a lot of our teams, especially 0 running back teams. So this is a perfect, beautiful 0 RB team where we take a detour on tight end, we can take a detour on running back. We fire off a bunch of running back picks. And I think that this is a beautiful 0 RB team that is viable, that is perfect. Diggs is beautiful. Ridley, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore. It's perfect. I love out of a back end of a draft. I don't mind doing this at all. But we're going to cater to you guys. I will occasionally do this as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that I use Bimodal RB as well. But you will see at the back end of drafts, I am a little bit more inclined to go with a 0 running back build. But I think that at the 11th pick, this is actually a really fun strategy. I'd be trying to grab 2 of Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler, and Nick Chubb. I think that those are fine guys to go with. We go Eckler, Aaron Jones, but instead of Eckler, if you want to go Najee or Gibson instead of Eckler, go ahead. It's more so just for construction. These are the 2 running backs that I like, and we lock in 2 RB1s on our team. And we come back around to the end of the 3rd round, and Swift was interesting here. We want to shy away from going 3 straight running backs. But let's just say that we're the kind of drafter that is scared of DeAndre Swift's groin injury. To be honest with you guys, I'm not that scared of it. I think that he's fine. He scored like 3 touchdowns in practice the other day. I think that he is going to be just fine. Maybe limited in week 1, but I think DeAndre Swift is so talented. And on top of that, the Dan Campbell quote was more so about his like conditioning or something like that. I think that he'll be just fine. Then we go Amari Cooper, like I said, and then we go Robert Woods. Now we just have a nice balanced team. We have 2 nice running backs, 2 nice wide receivers, and we come to the 5-11, and this is perfect. Again, I really love this 5-6 turn. You can really establish some dominance at the turn if you play it correctly, because I like Jamar Chase, Chase Claypool, and Odell Beckham. I have them all in the same tier in that 5th round. And TJ Hawkinson is by far the best tight end available. And like I said, in that 5'11", 602 spot, I'm cool with going Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, any of those guys. And with only 1 tight end available, 3 wide receivers I like available, with only 2 picks between me and that guy at the 12 spot, especially because he doesn't have a tight end, we go Hawkinson, he goes Odell, Jamar Chase, and then we go Chase Claypool. That's perfect execution. That's exactly how you want to play that. So now we do have 3 detours from wide receiver. So now we really hammer wide receiver. We go Laviska Shenault, we go Will Fuller, and I think that Gallup is even a nice option there if you don't like Will Fuller. But those are the wide receivers I'm targeting there. In that 7 and 8 spot, we go with more wide receivers through our flex spot. Now we're looking nice. We have some depth at the position. Everything looks good, and now we just need kind of a serviceable RB3 in the 9th round. And the problem is that once we got to the 9th, I think Zach Moss and James Conner were interesting there. The problem is that we needed 1 more wide receiver. I had Darnell Mooney. This is the downside of the turn. I had Darnell Mooney in this tier, and I had Zach Moss and James Conner. And we went with Darnell Mooney because, 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver, and I wanted to stack up those wide receivers. We go Darnell Mooney. We miss out on both Zach Moss and James Conner, which stung a little bit, which forced us to take Tony Pollard, which I don't mind a lot. The only problem is that we don't want to really start him on bye weeks, but because we have such strong running backs at the top, we're not going to have to use him unless if we probably suck anyways and one of those guys busts or gets hurt. So we have to really make it a point of emphasis with this team that we want to be building RB3s off waivers, really churning out the bottom of our bench to get a guy that can fill in on bye weeks if one of them was to get injured. Then again, Tannehill falls too late at the 11th spot. We come back around to the 11th, and Tannehill's there. Very easy pick. We don't need a QB2 at this point. So then we can just hammer running backs and wide receivers the rest of the way. And this is just a very balanced draft. We go James White for a PPR floor. I personally like James White over J.D. McKissic, but if you want to go for J.D. McKissic, fine. And I also don't mind Alexander Madison there, but for us, because we already had Tony Pollard, who is a pure handcuff, we want to have some startable weeks there in case if we need it. So James White is going to give us more of that PPR floor, whereas Alexander Madison is just a pure handcuff. He's not going to give you anything on a week-to-week basis that you can rely on. Sometimes he will come in for Dalvin Cook and, fall into the end zone or whatever off like 10 carries, but that doesn't happen often. Then we go Terrace Marshall, Jacoby Myers, just to lock in some more of that wide receiver depth, because in a team like this where we pass on wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, I'm trying to make up ground at wide receiver to try and hit on something nice, because my one gripe with a team like this is that we lack upside at wide receiver. Like I said earlier, the advantage you can get at wide receiver is when you get one of those like top 5, top 6 guys that average 20 points per game, and we kind of cut ourselves off from that upside at wide receiver. So I want to have as many bullets in the chamber to try and find that later on in drafts. So that's why we go Terrace Marshall, Jacoby Myers, and then we go Ty Johnson. Is just, he's my favorite round 15 flyer at running back. You can take whoever your guy is there. And I think that this is a fine team. This is like very balanced. This is very traditional. And I think this is the best way for those of you guys out there that don't like that aren't bought into, hero running back and zero running back. You don't want to punt any of the running back positions, which I think is completely fair if you're not comfortable with that. And I think that this is a great way to get your running backs early without chasing running backs into the RB dead zone. It's the perfect way to execute a draft in that area. I'm telling you guys, it's not worth it to give in for a Damian Harris, for a Michael Carter, Chase Edmonds. There's no reason to draft those guys or like a Mike Davis. None of those guys need to be in this build. The biggest thing I can say is if you go 2 running backs early, treat those running backs that they are studs. They are going to win you this league, and draft the rest of your team depending on that. Don't go out here and pass on wide receivers to go get running back depth. It's overrated. Then we go with our last team here out of the 10 spot, and we double dip on a 0 running back team here. Why not go with 2 0 running back builds for you guys? Because these are stronger at the turn, and I didn't plan on doing this as 0 running back, but I went Stephon Diggs first round, and if Tyreek Hill gets to you, you do that. If you can go Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, that is such a beautiful, beautiful start. And God, that is just perfect, man. And then we come all the way back around into the 3rd round, and we grab Cooper. Then we go Chris Godwin. Feel free to take whatever mix, whatever flavor of Evans, Godwin, Kupp, Tyler Lockett, whoever your guys are. Feel free to take DJ Moore. Take any of those guys. So then what happened in the 5th round is we missed out on that tier that I like. Remember, I really like that range where it's T. Higgins, Claypool, Ayuk, OBJ, Deontay Johnson, Jamar Chase. All of those guys I'm really, really big fans of. We missed out on that whole tier. And I don't think that Judy, Sutton, Robbie Anderson are worth 5th round picks, so we pivot. We pivot to the onesies in the 5th round. We see Lamar Jackson, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, and we see Mark Andrews. So we have 3 tight ends, and we have 1 quarterback available. So I say, you know what, let's go Lamar Jackson in the 5th round and hope that one of the tight ends make it back to us. We have 3 tight ends on the board. I don't think the 2 teams ahead of us aren't going to take 3 tight ends in that span. So Hawkinson makes it back to us, and that's beautiful. Now, in hindsight, I think that I probably should have gone Mark Andrews just to stack him with Lamar Jackson. I just like Hawkinson a lot more than Andrews, but I think Andrews was the right pick there. So if you wanted to go Andrews there, whatever. But again, this is just for construction more than it is individual players. And I want to reiterate this. In 0 running back, we want to be stacked at every position outside of running back, and we did that. We are stacked everywhere. We are stacked. We have beautiful wide receivers, beautiful quarterback, beautiful tight end. We are stacked everywhere. Now, I want to say that if you double dip on quarterback and tight end like this, you want to wait on running back. We still want a stable of wide receivers. We want to have wide receivers to brace for injury, for bye weeks. We want all that. So with the 7-8 turn, we're looking at wide receivers. We go Chenault and for Fuller. Again, if you want to go Gallup there, that's absolutely fine. So now we have quarterback, tight end, wide receiver all locked up. Now, if you wanted to make one detour for Javonte, Chase Edmonds, or no, those guys weren't available. If you wanted to make detours for, I don't know, man, like Raheem Mostert, I just think that you got to wait on it a little bit more. You have to stack up that advantage at wide receiver, or else it was all for nothing. Because some of your wide receivers you took early are going to get hurt. Some of them are going to bust. And if you lose that edge at wide receiver later on in the season, your team is screwed. But now we're in a spot where every position is locked up to the point where I don't think I need a second one. I don't need another wide receiver. I don't need a second tight end. I don't need a second quarterback. So we are in a spot now where we can literally rip running back for the next 7 picks. And that's what we did. We go Zach Moss and Gus Edwards. Those give us stable, usable weeks in our running back spot, which is perfect. They're both on high-scoring offense. They're both, they can luck into touchdowns. And I want to say, does this team look pretty to the average fantasy gamer? No, but I can't stress this enough. The most vanilla team ever has running back 1, RB2, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, and then their flex is RB3, wide receiver 3. That is the most balanced team possible. We are just going with wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2 through our flex. So we still have 2 1s, 2 2s, and then we have RB3 and RB3 in our running back spot. So that's still 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s, just like that balanced team. It's just allocated differently in spots where it's more safe. We can kind of stack our advantages elsewhere, and we get better as teams get running back injuries. So as everyone else's team falls apart, we are going to benefit at that running back position. Then with this team, with these running backs after Moss and Edwards, we want to really mix and match these archetypes. I always talk about these archetypes. We want to go for like ambiguous guys that are just stable RB3s, PPR monsters, handcuffs. You want to have a mix and match of all of those guys. So we go Giovanni Bernard for that PPR monster type upside. We go Sony Michel because he's in that ambiguous backfield kind of guy. And then we just hammer Darrington Evans, Damian Williams, and Ty Johnson, who are just kind of deep handcuffs that we're just hoping that they kind of step into a starting role. So now we have 7 running backs that we can rotate through. And with a team like this, you need to be really active on waivers. We're trying to replicate that running back production. Remember, when that starting running back goes down, you run to waivers, you grab him, you put him in your starting lineup. There's going to be a guy off waivers. Someone by week 5 will be a league winner off waivers. We're going to have this year's James Robinson, this year's Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissick. So this is a pure zero running back team. This is the most pure zero running back team. No running back until round 9 as God intended. And I love this team. This is a very fun team. Going Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill is a huge, huge advantage over everyone else in a PPR league. But I love this only for experienced players. If you're down for this kind of build where you have to be just an absolute degenerate on waivers and you have to really keep up with things in the fantasy space, this build is for you. But if you're not into that, if you're not that deep into fantasy, if you haven't, experimented enough with this kind of thing, I wouldn't recommend it for you. And that's going to take us to the end of the video. And we've now covered every spot of the draft using all 3 of my favorite strategies. We've gone over all 3 of those strategies. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you've enjoyed this whole series, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. And if you want to go out there and dominate your home league with these kinds of strategies, with these players that I'm picking, it is all outlined in my draft guide on patreon.com/Ron Stewart. So make sure you check that out. It has all of my rankings, my top 250 and Superflex and 1 quarterback leagues, my tiers across all of those. And it even has exclusive parts of the Discord where you can get my trade advice, my fab advice for waivers, all of that. And the ranks are set up so my running backs are pushed up towards the top in the first 2 rounds. Then you have wide receivers through the dead zone. And then you have running backs that are pushed out of the dead zone into the back end where you're not really drafting them as much unless they're at a huge value. And it sets your teams up where it is very sound from historical data where you are not taking running backs in bad spots in your drafts and you're picking teams that are going to win you championships. So if you're trying to win and dominate your home leagues, your high stakes leagues, whatever you're playing out there, make sure you go check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And that's going to do it for us, man. And we're going to do one more of these like strategy videos probably in another week or so where I'm going to probably drop like a complete draft guide type video where we go over, I don't even know what I had planned for that video, but you guys have loved the strategy video so much. I'm going to, I don't know, maybe outline exactly what I'm doing from all the picks and just kind of like a primer before you go into your drafts. And that's going to do it for us. We're going to do more player-centric videos this week, so be on the lookout for that, like must-own running backs, all of that kind of stuff. And we're getting really close to the NFL season, man. So we're going to be pumping out content daily, maybe even sometimes more than daily, maybe 2 times a day sometimes. We're going to go crazy. So if you're into this content, you're into what I'm spitting in these videos, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. And as always, man, I will see you guys in the next one.